This is the Body Wise podcast. Thank you for joining Laura and Cristina for another intimate exploration of collective wisdom.
Welcome to Body Wise podcast. I'm super excited today. We have Gemma from Everyday Latina here. She lives in Denver, Colorado with her husband, Matt, and their three amazing kids. One that's just brand new. I was just telling her I don't know how she's doing things. brand new baby. Originally from Chihuahua, Mexico, but she grew up in the US, and she's a former elementary school teacher. Now dedicated to being a mom and running the blog full time. And I love on your blog how you say it's like food and mommyhood. I love that. Very cute. You've had the blog for a little over 2 years, and you share authentic recipes, like your parents' recipes and home remedies and healthy takes on Mexican classics. I know you've done a lot of stuff with Whole30, but essentially your blog is about your family, your beautiful culture, your expression, your passion, and just your life, your story. And I love that. And I think you share it beautifully. And I love seeing on the Whole30 recipes take over, and your food looks amazing. So welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about Everyday Latina.
So like you said, Everyday Latina is about 2.5 years now, which is crazy to think. And I actually started it about a year after I decided to stay home with my kids. And, being a teacher, I was so used to just being really creative and always teaching something and always doing something. And even though being a mom does offer you that, I needed something that was really for myself. And I had been reading a lot of blogs and looking at Pinterest all the time. And, I really feel like I learned a lot about how to be a mom because I was always on mommy blogs, and I was like, I could be a blogger. I could tell people stuff, So I started talking about it, and my husband was like, why don't you just start blogging about what you're doing? And he's like, that's a great idea, and it's just a creative way for you to have something that allows you to think outside of being a mom and staying home. And, I needed more interaction. So I decided to just go ahead and get it started. And at first it was I was thinking it was going to be more mom related stuff, but the thing that I do, and I did, I just do it all the time, is cook. I'm always cooking, and I'm always learning and taking notes from my parents because they're such amazing cooks. And as I started thinking about what I wanted to do with the blog, I realized that it was a perfect opportunity for me to be able to not only learn my parents' recipes, but then document them, and then also document the stories that are behind them. Because I have memories of all of these different dishes, or just being in the kitchen with my parents. So it's just been such a great opportunity for me to really document these wonderful family, our family history, in this blog. And then, my sister reads it, and my brother reads it. And it's really fun for us to have a place where we can record these wonderful memories.
I love that. So my abuela passed away last year, but she was the last one, my dad's mom, and my mother's mother passed away many years before that. But with her passing, and it was my last grandparent. And I felt this need to, I want my kids to know where they come from and these stories. And I mean, my husband's American, and I think of my sister also, my niece's father's also American. And I wonder if I want the kids to know, I want her family to still be Cuban after this generation, you know? And I think that that's such a beautiful way to do it, because the food is it's our love language. Our culture revolves around feeding people and the recipes that you create. And I love that. And I think that's such a wonderful way to immortalize that for your family. Beautiful.
Yeah, it's been really fun. And I'll call them and I'll ask them what's the story behind this? Because some of the recipes I have memories about, and then other ones I know that they have a history about. I shared salpicón, and it's a shredded beef salad. And my mom and my dad actually had it as their main dish at their wedding. And my grandmother, my mom's mom, she's the one that cooked it for everybody. And they had about 75 guests, but she cooked all of the salpicón for everybody. And so just that story, I'm like, oh my gosh, this has such a strong meaning in our family. It's not just a salad, there's more to it.
Yeah, I love that. That's amazing. Beautiful. So a lot of the recipes that you do are also you know, you use a lot of the traditional ingredients, but some of them you modify to do like paleo or whole 30. And how do you find that balance between traditional, you know, the traditional Mexicano flavors and then paleofying things?
So what's been really nice is that my dad was a biochemist in Mexico, and I always like to brag about that. So he was a biochemist, and his brain is like a scientist's brain. So, you know, when I cook things, I'm always going and like tapping into their minds. And my dad, a long time ago in our household, he was like, we are doing away with lard. My mom was always like, we're always going to have salads when we eat something. And, you know, they always try to vary it up. Like, let's not have too much red meat. So I really learned from them how to start thinking in a more like healthy way and how to really vary what we were eating. So that's always been something that's really helped me. And then I just started reading more about the things that I really have cut out completely have been like chicken bouillon, you know, because it has MSG, and I can see the difference in my body and the way that I feel cutting that out and still having it. So there's certain things like that where I'm like, no, we're completely eliminating that. Like, let's find other ways to incorporate those flavors without using these like chemical additives that aren't good for us. But it's been a lot of trial and error, a lot of talking to my parents and trying to figure out what are flavors that, you know, they think are important, and then finding other things out there that might be similar. But at the end of the day, I think what a lot of people sometimes, like, they're shocked when I share something and I'm like, it's healthy Mexican. And they're like, I didn't know that Mexican could be healthy. I thought it was just all deep fried stuff. And in reality, it's not, right? There's so much to Mexican cuisine, and there's a lot of fresh things, you know, like pico de gallo is basically just a salad. Guacamole is basically just a salad, you know, and things like that. You're just using a lot of fresh ingredients. And I think that that's really important. And a lot of things, a lot of dishes like that, people don't realize that they're already whole 30, they're already paleo. Like, you really don't have to do anything to them. And you might have to cut out tortillas, and you might have to cut out, you know, like lard and things like that. But you can get away with having those flavors still. But, you know, you have to be willing to give things up. And for me, what I always love about Whole 30 is when Melissa talks about food freedom, because, you know, I'm not like completely like have cut out all of those things. I'm not like that. It's like, I still want those things, but now I know to do them in moderation, or to be able to not maybe not deep fry everything, and like maybe bake some things and find other alternatives of cooking things as well. And that has helped a lot.
Yeah, that's awesome. It is true. There's so many, I mean, like, Mexican cuisine is very heavily gluten-free. I mean, there's corn, but very gluten-free friendly. And even, you know, dairy, like, I mean, in the more like Tex-Mex or Americanized version, there's all this cheese, but really not in traditional. It's more like the cotija, you know, the crumble. It's not everything. Like, so I do think that it is, it's so much cleaner, and it's beautiful. I mean, lots of vegetables, and like, I mean, oh my gosh, you like peel walnuts and stuff to make like sauces, like super labor intensive, but from scratch, cooking and flavors there. And that's awesome. And I do think, you know, for a long-term balance, when you're not on a Whole 30 or aren't allergic to something, for sure, finding that freedom, how many things can you add back in that are still good for you, that work for you? Like, I've been able to reintroduce like certain frijoles recently, like frijoles negros and colorados. And so even like the fava beans, and like, I can't eat them every day, but if I soak them and pressure cook them, I can digest them really well. And it's kind of nice to know that I can go home and have like the moros, and, you know, like with, you know, the rice, the rice and beans that my grandmother makes, or not my grandmother, but my aunt this now will make. And that's nice, because it's, as long as she doesn't put peppers in it, like the ají, I'm good. Awesome. So what's your best advice for someone who has to change their diet for health issues, but really misses traditional recipes from their culture?
I mean, I really think that you just have to get into the kitchen, and you have to learn your ingredients. And I think that's a really big thing. Like, I can look at a recipe and think, oh, this is going to be a really good recipe just based off of the ingredients. And, or I'm going to be able to cut out all of these things because I know that this recipe doesn't really need it for flavor, or perhaps it's using too much of something. And it's been all trial and error. And like I said, it's been like a partnership with my parents that they think that way. So they've really been able to help me. But in order for me to learn how to cook, because when I got married, like I didn't know how to cook very much, I had to get into the kitchen and try it. But it's been very much like Whole30 has helped me. And we did like a bunch of diets before even Whole30, where we were always, my husband and I were always trying to think of what is making us feel this way, and what do we need to eliminate? What can we eat less of? And as we've gone through it, and it's been nice to have a partner in it, the fact that he thinks that way too. I think that's a really big thing. If you can find somebody that supports you in your like culinary experiments, I think that's really important, because then both of you can think, okay, we're going to cut this out, and I'm going to support you and you're going to support me. And we're going to see if this is what's making us feel icky, or this is what's making us, not sleep well or have allergies or whatever it is. And those are the things that I started noticing when I started really thinking about food. Like, you actually have to be very conscious of the fact that food is not just, something that's just going to fill me up, but it's nutrition. It's energy. It helps you fix things about how you're feeling. And if you don't think of food that way, if you just think of something that you're just going to like open the refrigerator and eat whatever's in there just because I'm hungry, then you're thinking about food all wrong. Like, you have to think of it as nourishment and something that's going to either help you be healthy or be detrimental to you. And you have to be willing to think like a chemist, think like a scientist, and start maneuvering things and changing things around so that you can see what really is going to be the best for your lifestyle and for you.
Yeah, cooking is definitely an art, but it's so science, and it's really cool. I think that's probably why your dad is so good at that, because it's very scientific. I think some of the best like food bloggers and chefs that I know have either backgrounds as teachers and like science teachers, or like chemistry and stuff like that. That's really cool. So what's one of your like go-to swaps? Like, if you could be like, these are, you mentioned the bouillon cubes. What are a few other things that like swaps that you made in your kitchen that you feel made a big difference?
So, I mean, it's not the same, but we used to eat rice like every single day and like all the time. So I've tried to really find other things, and there's the craze with cauliflower rice, but I think the reason that there is that craze is because cauliflower basically will take on any flavor, anything that you put on it. So it actually has been really good. I always think that it's a good test if my kids eat it and I can tell them like, this is arroz. And they're like, oh, this is really good, So I do that with quinoa. I do that with cauliflower rice for rice. I try to swap it out, and, they really do think, oh my gosh, this is actually good. I really like this. And it is rice. And, they think of it that way. I also, just like sugary drinks and things like that, we're really big into just how can you add lime and to anything, lime makes everything taste good. So it's like, we drink a lot of water with like lime, or you can like put like fresh fruit in it. We make a lot of like agua de sandia, like watermelon juices and stuff like that, but we've cut out the sugar. Right. So that's another thing that I think you do. If you go to like a Mexican restaurant and you get like agua fresca, the reason that juice tastes so good is because it has a ton of sugar. And that is something that is not good in like a lot of Mexican foods. Like if you get the Coke, the Coca-Cola has a ton of sugar in it. So that's why all those things are so good. So we've cut a lot of sugar out. So we try to either use alternatives, like honey and maple syrup and things like that, or just completely cut it out. And your palate starts getting used to it. And I think those are big things. And we also have, like you said, there's not a lot of gluten, but there is gluten in some, like my dad loves flour tortillas and bread and things like that, but he actually has a gluten intolerance that he found out about for like maybe like 3 years ago. So now it's like been my task to learn how to bake without gluten and how to do things that will help him. Like he helps me so much with the other recipes, but now with like the baking, I'm helping him. And so we've cut a lot of that out. But the thing about it is so many people are now finding out that they have issues with certain foods, that things are more readily available where before it wasn't. So it's really fun to be able to recreate, like tortillas and bolillos and whatever it might be, with all these like different alternatives. And it's fun, it's fun. And and it hasn't been that big of a deal to cut those things out, you know, because we just try to get creative.
Right. Do you like the siete tortillas, and what do you think about those?
I do, I like them, but I don't necessarily buy them very much because they're
Very
expensive. You know, they're expensive. So we've had them, and I've had my dad try them out, and so then he tries to like try to figure things out, you know, based off of what the ingredient list says. Yeah. And we've made some, but we still haven't cracked the code on how to make like really good, like pliable alternative flour tortillas.
That's not like the flour. Have you tried cassava flour? The otros, the recipe on their bag?
We haven't. No, we've tried cassava flour for breads, but not for tortillas. Like
it's pretty good. It's pretty good. They have one. It's just they have a recipe on the bag, on their flour bag, that like the Otto's brand, the Autos, and it's pretty good. It's pretty pliable. I mean, I think you could probably like make it even better, but that's a good. You know, you might want to check that one out.
That might have to be a project for my dad and I soon.
Yes, for sure. So fun. Awesome. Well, there's a lot of good tips. It's true. I think that there's a lot of things that sometimes I think about, like when you think about these recipes that we think is like traditional recipes that our families are eating, when you're thinking back, these are only going back like a few generations, like maybe 1 or 2 generations, because even before then you get back into like definitely like once the diets were a little more westernized, right? And I think that, or even just like it became a socioeconomic thing, because I think a lot of the foods that like my family grew up eating, they grew up in a communist country. They didn't have access to food. So a lot of the recipes that they were making, it's essentially like, it's poor people food. They made it, we eat it because it was cheap, because it was a way to make the food last longer, go farther, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a lot of times what sugary things do. It's like, well, if you put sugar in water, you're going to have energy and calories at least in your body. So sometimes I like to think of like, what was it even beyond, like not what my mother ate or my grandmother, what my great grandmother eat or her mother, and try and look at those foods, because I agree. Sometimes like something that I made it, and it's a recipe I told you before we got on, that my grandmother's best friend married a Mexicano. And so there's a lot of influence in the family, was the tepache it's so good with the pineapple. And I lived in Hawaii and I had always had pineapple. So I would make it, but I would do it with honey, a little bit of honey and cinnamon. And it was so delicious, and it was like super easy to make.
Yeah.
My
dad makes that all the time.
It's awesome. Yeah, I was like, because I was a little nervous, and Justin's like, "What's up there? Is it good? Are you gonna get sick?" And I was like, "It totally turned out, and it was fizzy, and it was like, so you make it with the pineapple rinds. For people listening, they don't know what it is, and so you put them in water, and I guess sugar. I did a little honey and let it ferment on top of the fridge, and it was like pineapple soda, homemade.
There it is. Yeah,
it's amazing. Awesome.
That you can make. You're using all the parts, right? That's another trick for the budget. Yeah,
for sure. I think you can do something similar. I haven't tried it, but with watermelon rinds as well, if I'm not mistaken. But I haven't tried it either. I probably wouldn't be as sweet though. I don't know. Yeah. So okay, I know you don't have to give up nightshades. I do, but
I know it's so sad.
It's so sad. I struggle. Sometimes I'm like, I'm just gonna write a book one day and just have tomatoes in there, and then just have someone help me test the recipes, or just eat them and feel like crap when I do it. I don't know. We'll see. But I do get a lot of messages because I am nightshade free, and then other Latinas come to me and they're like, "How do you do it?" And I'm like, "Unfortunately, it's just really sad. I have to give up a lot of the foods." But are there any tricks or ideas that you can think of that could help Latinas who had to go nightshade free? I mean, for me, like I use strawberries in my salsa. I mean, how sad is that? It's like a salsa, but or like anato, like the achiote, which is for redness. But I don't know. Are there any dishes, or at least do you think are there any flavors that you could think of that don't even require nightshades that would be yummy?
Well, I think the thing that I thought of right away is how I cook for my kids. And I think this is actually not the right thing to do, but that's just the way I was raised. It's like when my mom would make a dish that was spicy, she would always have like a separate dish for us that wasn't spicy. And she would avoid adding any of the, the peppers and things like that. And then I was super picky growing up. So like I didn't like onion, I didn't like tomatoes. So it was like she had to be and my sister still doesn't like tomatoes actually. So like she had to be very selective with what she would cook or how she would cook it or what she would set apart. And It took me a long time to actually develop the taste palette for peppers, because I was like, oh no, I didn't have them growing up. And I ended up doing the same thing to my kids. And my husband's like, maybe we should just try like with the third to just, have them not avoid peppers to see if they like them right away. But like I said, it's something that ends up affecting, I think, their taste palettes. But I do end up cooking a lot of foods that are like, separate for them, but are Mexican foods, but like I don't add certain things to theirs. So it's like, I think if you think all Mexican food has to be spicy, like it doesn't, you can always make it and, add there's so many seasonings like oregano and cumin, and, if something has like enough salt and pepper, it'll taste good, but I think certain like bay leaves, like there's so many like other spices that I use that add a lot of flavor, and you don't necessarily have to have the tomato. You don't necessarily have to have the peppers, and it's going to be really hard, to make like a salsa or anything like that. But, if you add enough garlic, if you add enough onion, if you add, you can really jazz up anything. You can really add that flavor in there. And like I said, like I don't use chicken bouillon, but like my parents are like big into that, and they add a lot of flavor with that. But like I found that broths, just use a lot of chicken broths, use a lot of beef broths, things like that will also add in those flavors that you need, and make them at home if you're afraid that they're going to have something, that you can't have. But really think about all of the flavor profiles that are in Mexican cuisine, and then there's so many things in there. There really are, and you can avoid so many of those things, and you can make sauces that just don't, just avoid those. And like you said, you can make like a mango salsa. Yeah, you might not have like any, or like pineapple salsa, you might not have the pepper in there, but you can have like the red onion that'll add that zing, and you can add cilantro. Cilantro is like
amazing,
adds so much flavor to everything. Like you can add it to at the end of a soup, and it'll transform a soup. So it's like so many things like that. My thing is always sauteing onions, garlic, and celery and carrots, right? And like things like that little concoction there. Yeah, it adds like so much flavor to any soup, to any dish that you make. Start with that, and then you just build off of that. And I think those are great ways to, I mean, it's not the same, but
yeah, it's funny because you said that, because my sofrito, my mom, so the way my mom always made it, her sofrito was always onions, garlic, and green bell pepper. That's like the Cuban sofrito. We don't do celery or carrots. I started putting celery and carrots in mine to augment, because I took out the peppers, and I really like it. And I mean, just that cooked down with the bay leaf, and you always have the bay leaf for the sofrito, and it really adds, like, again, before you start a stir fry, before you start a stew, before you start anything, you do the trio first, and it really adds this awesome depth of flavor. So that's a really good point. I think that, I mean, I've been cooking nightshade free for years, and again, while some of my dishes aren't traditional like Cuban dishes per se, the seasoning's always there. And again, oh my God, cumin. Oh, cumin's amazing. And black pepper, you add enough black pepper, it can add spice. You add enough garlic to anything, it'll add spice.
It's true.
So yeah, that's true. And I think just getting over the fact of, like, just because you're tweaking something to make it work for you doesn't mean it's not, it could be your new authentic, if that's what's going to work for you, because you're making it and it's for your family. And that notion of, like, are my abuelas looking down on me, like, in shame? Like, I don't think so, right?
Yeah, no, you have to make it work for your family, like you said, and for your well-being. Like, you don't want to feel gross all the time. That's so horrible to always to eat and then hate yourself later. Right. And like, it's just not the right way to live. Like, I went way too many years, like dairy. Oh my gosh. Like, just thinking like, I have to drink milk. I have to. And this is just what it has to be like, because that's what's available. That's what's being given to me for breakfast and everything. And it wasn't until I realized that feeling that I had in the mornings when I would drink milk, that it would like burn going down my throat. I'd be like, oh wait, I don't have to feel that. Okay, I'll give up milk. Sorry, Mom. Sorry, Dad. Like, we're gonna have to like reduce some of the things that we make. Yeah. But I just can't keep feeling that way.
Yeah, for sure. So, something I think about, I started thinking a little bit more about it when the whole Goya thing happened, and people were like, And Flor Gomez, and she's I Am Simply Flor. She posted something about like, why are you surprised? Like they've never created a product that's good for their customers. So like, why would you even care about it? And I thought about that so much, that like the bouillon, like people ask about like the sazon or that I use, or the adobo. And no, I haven't used the Goya products in a long time because they have a lot of additives in them, like a ton. And so I was just making my own home seasonings. I recently discovered a brand called Luisa that makes like organic ones, and they're like awesome with like sazon and adobo and seasonings. But what do you think about that? Like, what are like, I feel like a lot of times these products that are specifically marketed to Latinos are crap. Like they have the worst stuff in them.
Yeah. I feel like there's just not enough education around it, and that's one of the main reasons that I wanted to also, start with the Mexican food, like how to make it healthier and how to cut those things out. Because like talking to my parents, when I talked to them and told them like how bad chicken bouillon was, which I didn't know until I started looking into it, that's what I grew up on. And I would tell them about it. And my mom was always having like all these headaches, and, they always had all these issues. And I started thinking about the things that we were taking in, because there, like you said, there's a lot of other things that we don't even know have, hidden gluten in them, and hidden, all these other things. And here's my dad that's like, I'm going gluten-free. And then I would look at labels. I'm like, did you know that this sauce that you've been using all your life has gluten in it? He's like, what? He's like, I didn't know. Or like chorizo. Oh my gosh, I love chorizo. And it has like gluten snuck into it, and things like that. And it's just so frustrating because I don't think that that's right. I do think that a lot of things are hidden because we're just not, it's things that we grew up with, right? So we're not educated on, and unless we go through this like reawakening, or this like where we want to eat differently, or we have somebody that's telling us, it's going to be really hard. So that's why I think doing something like what I'm doing, or what you're doing, is so important, to be able to get the word out and say like, look, there's alternatives, and now there's companies coming out that are making things that are better, like a lot healthier, and look at your labels and things like that. But there's just not, that's not out there. So it's almost like a new generation of people that we're coming up and we're saying like, no, mom, dad, abuelita, abuelito, whoever it might be, tios, like you don't have to eat that way. And I think that's our charge. We're just gonna have to continue to do that because it's just not there.
Right. That's so important. And I think a big part of that is access to the information. And that brings me to my next question. Your goal, you're working on, you want to make the blog fully bilingual. Yes. Tell me more about that. Like, that is an undertaking.
It is, which is why I put it off because that was the goal from the beginning. Right. It's always been to have it be bilingual. But what's really pushed me more to it is I have, all my extended families in Mexico, and I'll have my cousins and my aunts and uncles. They're like, we saw the picture that you posted on Facebook of, such and such dish. But you don't have it in Spanish, so I can't make it. And, so they're always wondering and asking. And so I told them, I was like, I'm going to make it in Spanish. I promise I will put everything out there in Spanish. And I've even had some of my aunts and uncles ask me about Whole30, and they don't know about it in Mexico, even though there's the book in Spanish and everything. They're not accessing it over there. So I've told them about it and they're really interested in it, but they're like, well, how do I find out more? And you have recipes that are like that. Well, how do I make them? And I realized that, I'm not giving them access here. I want, my aunts and uncles and and people here in the United States who don't speak English to be able to have access to those things and to be able to talk to them. And here I have it all in English. How are they going to access it? So I really do. I think that that's really important. I think that's going to be a really great next step that is going to hopefully be able to help, and people will have a good response to it because it'll be available to, to people who really need it and who will. I always love the messages that I get from people that tell me like, oh, this is just like what my grandma used to make or my mom used to make, but now you're making it in like a different way and you're cutting this out and cutting that out. And I love that. So I think that that's really important, is how can I keep it as authentic as possible, but then be able to talk about the health benefits around it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's so important. I myself just started with my Instagram captions, putting them in English and Spanish.
I saw that.
And it is 5 extra steps for every post. but I was like, I caught myself too. I'm like, man, I'm doing it. I'm doing that. I feel like it is important. And granted, I think the younger generation of Latinos that are on social media, it's not like it's not our abuelos and our tios
Right. Yeah.
but still, I do think about that sometimes. Like, I wish my book could have been could be in Spanish, or like even my father, who has both my books, and I think they just collect dust in his house because his wife doesn't cook. But even she did, like, I mean, he speaks English, but it's not his. It's very broken, and so I think about that too. But I think that's so important. I think that's a wonderful resource. So I'm excited to see that come to life, because I think it's really needed. So you're starting a YouTube channel. Tell us about that.
Yes. So I have a YouTube channel right now, but it's just mainly housing some of those like top-down videos, where you're like cooking in order to have them on the blog. But I've really just been thinking about, as I'm staying home and like I continue to cook every single day. And some days I just like cook all day long, not as much right now with the new baby, but, but still, like I'm always cooking. I'm always thinking about what to cook. And I'm always looking to see what other people are cooking and what other moms are doing and things like that. And the easiest way to access that is always on video. It's much easier than, sitting down and reading a blog. Like if you can just have it up and be watching it. And so I was thinking about that, and I really thought, well, why don't I start making videos, not only of my recipes, but then also just like, what am I cooking in a day that would help like other moms? Because that's how I get ideas. Like I'll call my sister all the time, like, what are you making for dinner tonight? What did you make last night? Like trying to figure out like what my day's going to look like, because it's so focused on food and what I'm feeding my family and what new recipes I'm trying. So I do a lot of my recipes and my parents' recipes, but I'm always trying other people's too. So I thought if I could just really, very casual, like effortless, like just record myself like, hey, here's the things that I'm cooking. This is how I'm putting things together. Because the blog is great to be able to share, like one recipe, but sometimes I wish that I could show like, let me show you how I actually make a meal out of this, and how I'm actually feeding this to my kids and how I'm actually feeding it to my husband and to us, or, or like if there's different, like if my dad comes over and I have to make something different for him based off of, his intolerance to gluten and things like that. So it's like, I'm always thinking about how can I share that? And I'll do it on like Instagram stories here and there, like, oh, look, this is what we're having for dinner. But I just thought if I could just have it recorded and up, and then like, that's what I enjoy watching. I always look to see like, what is a person, what is a mom cooking in a whole day? And how is she putting together all of these meals for her kids? And so I'm going to try it and I'm going to see. But I think if I'm already doing it, if I'm already cooking all this stuff, like, why not show it? And why not talk about, this is the way my kids eat it. This is the way I eat it. This is the way that you can make it fit for your family, or how you can, as a mom, be able to cook all of these things in a day, and, and go from there.
Yeah. Awesome. I think that's going to be super helpful. I agree. Sometimes that's what the questions you get the most, like not just how to make this, well, how do you serve it with? Like, how do you prep it? What do you do with the leftovers? Like, because it is about just not the one recipe, but yeah, like putting it all together. So that's going to be really helpful. And especially for other moms. And, speaking about moms, you're a mom, you have 3 kids and you just had a baby during a pandemic. Tell us about that experience. I mean, pregnancy during coronavirus, having a baby during coronavirus, like, what's that been like?
It's been different. I didn't leave the house very much. I haven't, really left the house very much since March, since, the shutdown happened and everything. And a lot of it was because my whole family was very on high alert, because you would hear all these stories that pregnant women could be more susceptible to it. I mean, it always changes, right? It's like one day you're more susceptible, other days it's the same as anybody else. You're actually not susceptible to it. But one of the things that my doctor had told me, she said, you might not be more susceptible to it, but if you get it, just like if you were to get the flu, we can't give you the medicines, or we can't do the, the methods that are being used to treat this the way you could to somebody else who's not pregnant, because we don't know how it's going to affect the baby. And so my mind is always like, how is this going to affect the baby? So I take care of myself a lot when I'm pregnant. And so with this, I took care of myself even more. So it's like, I didn't go grocery shopping ever. That was all Matt. He's all my husband. He was always going out and he's buying everything. And I had to like make sure that, he understood what things I needed. And then I only went out for doctor's appointments. And, it was hard because he wasn't able to go to any of the ultrasounds, and he wasn't able to go into any of the appointments. And I like FaceTimed with him during like the big anatomy scan. And so that was hard because I felt alone a lot of the time when I would have to do all those things by myself. And it felt, and like no one was allowed to be in the waiting room. So it's just my husband and I were there. And then it was just really intimidating. You were just told that you had to take care of yourself so much, you know, because you didn't know how it was going to affect even the delivery. If I were to have had a fever or show symptoms, they would have taken the baby away and quarantined the baby from me for 2 weeks. So it was like those thoughts, you know, were always in my mind. And I tried not to be paranoid or not to be scared, but it's hard not to. And so I would always explain it as I'm being cautious. I'm just being overly cautious. I'm not scared. I'm not paranoid. I'm just being overly cautious. But in the back of my mind, always thinking, oh my gosh, what if something, you know, really bad happens? I actually am really scared. So it was not a fun experience, but at the same time, because we were hunkered down at home, you know, with the family, it was different. It was like everyone was really involved in like taking care of me and right now taking care of the baby and being making sure that everything is okay with me, where before I was working and I was doing all sorts of other things. So you didn't think about it as much as we had to now.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing that it sounds like Matt's a really helpful guy. Like,
oh yeah,
that's awesome. That's
yes.
everything that makes or breaks it, huh? That's awesome. I mean, I definitely think that, yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, there's already so much nervousness already, you know, around, it's always, you know, having babies, but, well, I'm glad you guys are okay and everyone's home and healthy and, you know, you did it.
Yeah, no, it's been, it's like I said, it's been different, but, and the, you know, the delivery was different than it has been other times too, just because, everything was so on high alert. You had to like wear masks and all sorts of things, but you know, we're recovering. Everybody's really happy. You know, the baby she's wonderful and sweet. And
oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. So, hey, Matt, what is your favorite recipe that you have on your blog?
Gosh, I was trying to think about this.
Okay.
And,
it's a hard one. I know. I've been asked to, and I'm like, ugh. You can give me top three.
Well, I'll give you two. I'll give you one that I learned from my dad and one that I learned from my mom. So, perfect. I think the one that I really, really love that's on there that is that I learned from my dad is the pork green chili, because like here in Colorado, pork green chili is like such a big deal. People love it, and like people, you know, will tout like we have the best green chili. No, we have the best green chili. So, you know, my dad, like it was not something that we grew up eating the way that it's made here. You know, it's very different in Mexico. So it's very much like a Colorado type recipe that my dad learned from seeing it here. But then he like added spinach to it because he was like, I just wanted to add spinach to it. And it makes it, I think some people are like, that's not real Colorado green chili, you know, because it has spinach in it, which is not. But the way that he was able to marry those flavors together, it's so good. And then I took it and then I like made it, you know, Whole30 and gluten-free. So then you have like a really healthy, hearty meal with the pork green chili, and and with the spinach added in. It's just like so good. So and he calls it espinacas a la puerque.
Oh, I love it.
He likes to make up names for everything. So that's what he calls it. And then for my mom, I really like her chicken salad, and that's I think one of my favorite blog posts in the whole blog, because I have like pictures of us in Mexico and of my birthdays in Mexico, and just what it reminds me of, and just all the birthday parties that we used to have out there, and like in the house that my dad built, and in our little backyard out there with all my cousins, because I have like so many cousins, you know, just being together, and all my aunts and uncles and my grandparents. So just the story behind that, and then the way that she was really able to take like a traditional Mexican recipe, and then she added her twist on it as she went along. That's what's shown me like, oh, you can take a recipe and you can change it, but it can still be like those authentic flavors. You just make it your own. And so I think that's a great example of that.
Awesome. I love that. Okay. Well, we'll have to check those out on the blog. So everyone listening, you guys got to head over to everydaylatina.com and find those two recipes. I love that you gave me like one from your mom and one from your dad. Like, this is beautiful. It's perfect. I love it. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming to hang out on the podcast today. It was great talking to you and getting to know you better.
Oh my gosh. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. And let everyone know where they can find you.
Yeah, so my blog is everydaylatina.com. And then you can also find me I'm Everyday Latina on everything. So on Instagram, on Facebook, you can find me on there. And I'm mainly on Instagram on the blog.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Gemma. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Cristina. I appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.